So, what's Donald Trump really like behind closed doors when he's dealing with a crisis, when he's making a big decision? And what are the biggest challenges with international trade negotiations and tariffs? And how do you deal every day with a hostile White House press corps? And what's harder to perform on national television, a two step or a tango? There is literally only one human being on the surface of this planet who is an expert in all of those things. And he's with us for this entire program, the one and only Sean Spicer. I'm Larry O'Connor, and you can call me Larry. Most people got to know Sean Spicer when he became the spokesperson for the first Trump White House. I've actually known him since 2010. He's literally one of the smartest people in Washington, D.C. He's worked in politics. He's worked at the Republican National Committee on Capitol Hill. He's worked in the White House. He's worked in an agency. He's worked in the media. And he joins us now to share some of his knowledge with us. Sean Spicer, that's how you introduce a guest and really talk them up for your audience. I hope you learned something, because usually you degrade me, you criticize me, you make fun of me when you're lucky enough to have me on your show.
I'll be honest with you, it's all just facts. This is what when I pull your bio, it's everything that's on your Wikipedia page. So I appreciate the kind words, but
Really?
look, as
That's
you
the
if you
deep
search,
dive research that you do, a
yeah,
Wikipedia page? That's impressive.
well, but when we have bigger guests, like they're PR people. But here's the thing: if you
Yeah.
search the internet, I'll be hard pressed to think you can find a negative thing about me. It's all very, very positive. Rave reviews. It's
That is
so that's what's challenging is how do you cull through all that positive information and synthesize it down to 30 seconds or 60 seconds. So I understand the challenge that you face when you have to introduce me, but
yeah.
it's tough because there's just so many good things you can say. How do you get it down to just a few? And I know that
For
challenge.
For our viewers who have stayed with us this long, let's get right into it. You're actually at the White House because this week we're celebrating the first 100 days of the Trump presidency. And uniquely, you were actually in the White House for the first 100 days of the first term of the Trump presidency. So, from your perspective right now, how do you compare the two?
Larry, it's a great question because I spend actually a lot of time thinking about this. And I have a column in my newsletter, SeanSpicer.com, and I spent time this week kind of reflecting on this because if you were in the first Trump White House, as I was, and you're looking at it now, there's a big difference. And I think a few things. I've narrowed it down to three: the people, the policy, and the processes. And so here's what I mean. When you look at the people, it's the people the president has chosen to surround himself with. And I know the media likes to talk about loyalists. I think they're missing the boat here because a dog can be loyal, right? Just sitting in a corner and being loyal to someone is in itself just a singular trait. But what the president has throughout his senior staff and the cabinet is people who are natural disruptors, people who are implementers of his agenda. And it's not just about loyalty; it's about taking action. So he's got people around him that are very different in that standpoint, but he's also kept a lot of people away. The people who we saw in the first term were there because they wanted to implement their own agenda or stop his, right? And then he's also got, if this extends out to like a very helpful Congress, which we didn't have. Yes, Republicans controlled it, but you think about the number of things that the president was trying to do that people in Congress, his own team, Republicans, stopped.
Yeah.
Then we talk about the policies, and I tie that in with the process, right? When these guys came in to office, they had a plan. They knew what they wanted to do, how they wanted to do it, what the courses of action were to implement those things. And we saw it. Like I joke all the time, Tom Homan didn't randomly pick a bunch of cities day one and say, let's just go see if there's people here illegally. He knew exactly where to go, how to execute the plan. And the results you can see for themselves. So I think for those reasons, this is a vastly different administration. And I don't think people will fully appreciate for a long time the impact of 4 years out of office has had. So in a consecutive term, which is what we've
Yeah.
had every time except once, you just keep going. It's the same people, it's the same policies. They had time to think and really reflect on what will I do if I come back. And I think that's vastly different, number one. But Larry, I say this as a guy who I was just having this conversation with a couple media types here on the White House driveway. I went and visited the president last week, and he's much more calm and confident and in how he is uh, approaching the job. There's a sense
Yeah.
of ease to him about uh, how he's doing this. He's not worried about the attacks. He's got a point of view and a direction, and he's just going and executing. And I think you notice that when you see him, that he's just so focused on moving the ball ahead and not worried about the noise that we had to deal with in the first term.
Sean, let's talk about the people because you describe them as disruptors, which many of them are. They also have one thing in common, and that is they're pretty good in front of a camera. They've got some media
Yes.
savvy. And the knock on Trump is, oh, he sees people on TV and he thinks that's good enough, so he hires them. No, that actually is part of the equation, isn't it? You've got to effectively defend this president's policies, defend the president, and proactively go after the media because you know how they can
Yeah.
be.
Let me ask you, you've got two shows on every day. You're very politically astute. So I say this in all seriousness because I'm not trying to trick you, I think. But name for me, how many members of the Biden cabinet can you name?
Oh, I got Mayorkas, I got Buttigieg, I got Blinken, I got Yellen.
Okay.
Um,
All right. But again, okay, so it's my test sort of failed here because you are, you for when you guys are on the radio and everything, you cover this stuff. But
but
for the
those were the
average
most high
person,
profile. I'm done.
sure,
Those are
sure,
my
sure.
four. That's it.
Okay, but I think the point is that you'd be hard pressed for most people to name a single one. In the Trump administration, I can name not just the cabinet, the sub cabinet, the senior staff, because they are out there. And it's not
Yeah,
just again, this is again where the media wants to at one part just say, oh, they're loyalists and they're missing the big picture. And it's not just that they're TV friendly, they're able to articulate what they're doing to the American people. So, for example, Lee Zeldin is out there, the EPA
yeah,
administrator, talking about how they're cutting regulations to make doing business better, uh, to make and improve our lives on a daily basis, right? These are things that when you have the ability to be media friendly, if you will, and good at it, like so many of these people in the cabinet, the senior staff do, you're going out there and you're telling the American people, here's what your government is doing to make your life better. And that's an important thing because Biden at one point, when they were asking him about what regrets he had, he said, well, I wish I had sold the Inflation Reduction Act better and da da da. And I disagree with that for the most part. But I think he was right in the sense that if you don't go out and tell people what you're doing, then it doesn't matter. And so you had a president that didn't do it. You had a vice president that really wasn't out there or effective. And then most of the cabinet, with the exception of Pete Buttigieg, although Pete Buttigieg didn't do his job well, he definitely tried to
yeah,
take a lot of credit for things and was media friendly. But that's about it, right? Janet
yeah.
Yellen didn't inspire anybody in the financial sector or give them confidence the way that, say, a Scott Bessent does or a Howard
Right.
Lutnick.
Yeah. And that's a big part of the job. I mean, people are criticizing Trump.
It's a
They're always
huge part
getting
of the
TV.
job.
It's a huge part of the job. You got to communicate what you're doing. Sean, Stephen Miller is an interesting character in that he was in both administrations and he had a central role. But it seems like he's so much more front and center. And I mean, you tell me because you know Stephen and you also know how the White House works. Is he a big part of the success in terms of these executive orders and the strategy to get things done?
Yeah, I looked around because you never know if he's just going to be behind you. But I do think so. Like he is very trusted by the president. He's very, very integrated into cabinet affairs and everything. So I think there are two sort of Stephen Miller's probably the most out front person, and people, but he's got a public persona. People know him. The
Yeah.
other person that I think is just critical to the president's success that probably isn't as well known is Russ Vogt, the OMB, the
Oh,
Office of
yes.
Management and Budget Director. That
Our
all of
audience,
this
I
stuff,
mention him all the
yeah,
time. He's the one who's actually gonna do what Doge suggests.
yes,
People always think, "Oh,
correct.
Elon's doing this, Doge is" they don't do anything. They
Well, no,
suggest.
correct, but I'll take it a step further. It's not just that, but I think even the stuff that you talk about with Steven, either you have funding or you don't. So if you have a great idea, you need funding to execute it. So Russ ensures that the good things, the smart policies, get funded and executed on, and then the bad ones don't. So I think
Yeah.
no matter who you are, Russ is the cog in the wheel that keeps things moving.
Yeah, and he also, by the way, coincidentally, he is also a carryover from the first term. He could hit the ground running knowing
Yep.
exactly what the job entailed.
Right, but
So,
but think
Sean.
about this, how much time
Yeah.
he spent in the last 4 years, again, getting back to the policies and the processes that I talked
Yes.
about. Russ spent 4 years thinking, "If I get another crack at this, this is what I'll do, and this is how I'll do it." So I,
Yeah.
I kind of think a lot of times in sports metaphors, right? And if you are thinking about a team and a team plays another team and then maybe a month later gets to play them again, usually in that time in between, they've looked at the tapes, they said, gosh, if I get a shot on the right, I'll take it. If I right, you war game it out. If and a baseball player might say, great, if I get that pitch down to the right, I definitely know I can hit it. But you analyze what went well, what didn't. And I think Russ in particular had a huge opportunity to sit back and think about what will I do on behalf of executing on the president's agenda if I get back in office.
Yeah. Some criticisms of the first 100 days is that everything is executive action and sort of reinitializing the executive branch,
Yep.
but not a whole lot legislatively. Is that a fair criticism, or are things, going to be slow moving down the other side of Pennsylvania?
It's interesting that you asked that, Larry. Caroline Levitt, yesterday, I had the opportunity to go in and do a little briefing with her. And I asked her that exact question, which was, what are those legislative priorities that you guys have beyond reconciliation to codify things in law? Because we've seen, Trump won, he secured the border, made us energy independent. Biden comes in, undoes all the Trump stuff, then Trump comes back in, puts it all back in place and expands on that. And so you have to wonder to yourself, God forbid we have another Democratic president, what happens? So they just don't do this. And so the only way to rectify that is to codify it in law. And that's what I think is critical for this White House is to say, what are those things while we know we have a Republican House and Senate that we focus on? I think immigration to me is one of the top things that has to happen. That if you
Yeah.
think about it, and I have been saying I don't know, years now, that I believe fully that part of the reason the Democrats want an open border is because they are trying to create a tranche of future voters. But it's even more nefarious than that. There is a report that came out in the last, I don't know, couple weeks that I read that shows, remember, the census counts bodies, not citizens. And so right
Yep.
now there are some estimates that Democrats have upwards of 10 seats in the House of Representatives because of the number of people in this country illegally in their congressional districts. And so if
Yep.
you don't think illegal immigration matters, that should scare you alone right there.
Yeah, and those House seats also translate to electoral college votes as
Yep.
well, so it works in those elections too.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
actually even a better. Yeah. That's
Sean, should they have waited to roll out the tariff plan? Did that cloud the first 100 days? Is that sort of a misstep for them?
no. I think, and I say that because there's a difference between the timing and I mean, I will say, I think some of the messaging could have been probably tweaked, but lesson learned. I mean, but at the end of the day, the president made it very clear during the campaign. I mean, heck, he's made it very clear since the 1980s what he thinks on tariffs. And so to not do it would have been a missed opportunity. And also, look, I don't think he understands that you have X amount of years in this job and that you can't, if you wait, it usually doesn't get better. Do what you want, do it quick, get out of the gate and make it happen. And I think he wanted to execute on tariffs because he didn't want to wait and he didn't want to hope that maybe a year from now or 2 years from now things would be better or different. So I'm glad he
Uh,
did it. I do think, I mean, tariffs do three things as far as what they've articulated. One, they help onshore jobs. They make it more attractive for companies to want to move their operations back to the US. Two, you can fight for fairness. So some of these companies have 30, 50, 60, 70% tariffs on our goods going into their countries. And we have probably the lowest tariff and non-tariff barriers coming into our markets. I think the president fighting for market access and fairness is definitely something that most people are on board with. But then lastly, they've also been talking about using some of that revenue that tariffs bring in for deficit reduction. And so the question that I think for a lot of people have is, okay, well, those are three things, but they don't always work together. And I think that's
right.
part of the problem.
Right. If
Because
you're
if you
bringing
if you right,
manufacturing here, yeah, you can't. How are you paying down the deficit if people are avoiding the tariffs? There's no revenue for that.
right, or
It's sort of like,
if you make a deal with a country, we say, hey, if you do X, I'll bring down my tariffs, right? And then they
right,
bring down the tariffs. Well, then you've lost the incentive or the money that would come in for deficit reduction. I
right.
get it. There's a little bit of both that they're trying to do. That's why the president has this 10% tariff across all goods. But I think from a messaging standpoint, I know that any one of those three are very attractive to a lot of people. I wish that the focus had just out of the gate been entirely on fairness. Maybe that's just
Yeah.
me, but I think that the president fighting and saying, why is it that they get access to our market virtually tariff and non-tariff barrier free, and we have these stiff penalties to get our products, and whether it's agricultural products or manufactured goods or financial
Manufacturing. Yeah.
services. and our service providers getting into their market. So I'm a believer that I would have liked to have seen just an entire focus just on that to keep it simple. I understand why he's doing what he's doing, but I again, just from a messaging standpoint, sometimes if it's simple, the American people can get their head wrapped around this. There's this focus group, Larry. I played at my show last night. Frank Luntz, who's not been a big supporter of the president, held this focus group. I don't know, 20, 30 people. I tweeted it out on X as well. And and so he's like 25 people who all supposedly were Trump voters. And he asked them about the tariffs and says, well, your 401ks have probably crashed and you're going to pay more for goods and services. So you guys can't be in favor of these tariffs, can you? And they all said, yep, every single
Yeah.
one of them. And Frank says, well, all of you? And they said, yep, every one of us, because they understand the greater good that the president is fighting for. And I
Yeah.
think that
I
that's
wonder.
it, because at some point, if we don't do this, and the one last thing I'll say that before I forget, because I'm getting to that age, is look, the easy thing politically for President Trump to do was nothing. Just let it keep going. Kick the can down the road like every other politician has. But he was willing to fight for America and willing to fight for American workers. And I think most of his supporters get that and are willing to stand by him.
I think that's a great point. I also wonder if that focus group, because I get it. Listen. I'm not happy when I look at my 401k either. But we've all just been through COVID. We saw how the market crashed for quite some time there 5 years ago, and it bounces back. And I think that we have confidence in our economy, especially if this is going to build us a stronger manufacturing base. Sean, I do wonder this though, and I talked about your resume. People might not know, but you worked in international trade during the Bush administration, right? What was the title there that you had?
I was the assistant U.S. trade representative for public and media affairs. It took two
There
lines on
you
a
go.
business card.
So you know this stuff. So here's my question, because I think everybody agrees, all the reasons why tariffs could work all connect back to China. So
Yeah.
why, and Democrats will say, yeah, China's a problem. We're on board with China. Elizabeth Warren is saying, yeah, let's go with China.
Yep.
So why didn't the administration just focus on China?
Well, I think they're pivoting a little to that now, but I think number one, because the president solely, believes in fairness, and so he didn't think it was fair that India could charge us 125% and the EU, whatever it is, 40%, 25 on certain products, whatever. But I think that I agree with you, and I actually asked Tammy Bruce this. She's on my show tonight. She's the State Department spokesman. And I said, to me, China is the greatest economic and military threat that we face as a country. What are we doing to deter them? And went into, a very, very well described strategy to deter China. But I agree with you. This is something that should be a bipartisan issue, because China is ripping us off economically. They screw with our
Right.
corporations that try to do business in there. They screw us in what they send us. I mean, and if
And
nothing
they're a
else, just think about what
military
happened.
adversary. Sean,
Right.
our entire like half of our naval fleet and half of our Marines are all on the Pacific Rim right now to do exercises to show China that we mean business if they ever threaten Taiwan. So why are we doing so much with them when we know that they're the problem?
I agree. I mean, frankly, I think this is something that we should rally around as a country. Part of the problem, Larry, and we're seeing this now, is that we got tough on China. And what did they do? They immediately cut off rare earth minerals. And what does
Yeah,
that do? That means all these things that deal with chips, and that, make our cars run, our computers run, our iPhones run. Like that puts us in a deep bind. Here's the problem: we have to unwind this. If your greatest adversary has all of the critical tools that you need to survive, you're not in a good place. And we saw this with COVID. They send us a disease, and then we literally are told, oh, by the way, go to them to get your PPE, your pharma,
yeah,
all your drugs. I mean, this literally like saying to the arsonist, could you send me some water after you're done lighting my house on fire?
right, right.
And we've clearly seen this. So to me, this is something that I think that the president should rally the American people around and saying, guys, we have a threat. The former chief of naval operations, she had a clock in her office, a countdown clock to 2027, when China has openly mused about potentially taking over Taiwan and creating a world war. I don't think there's a great book that a listener of mine suggested, Michael Pillsbury, The Hundred-Year War. And so I said,
Mhm.
fine, I'll read it. And when you read the public comments that China has made about what their long-term goals are, it's not questionable. They're very open about it. And I just think that we need to rally the American people to understanding how critical it is that we unwind ourselves from our dependency on China in so many areas, and at the same time build the military deterrence and capabilities to ensure that we are ready to deal with them. Because make no mistake, it is coming our way. It's just a matter of when, not if.
Sean, great leaders, elected officials, leaders in business, military leaders, they all have their own idiosyncratic ways of doing things. They have a process for making decisions. You've worked with elected leaders, you've worked with military leaders, you've been in the Oval Office with Donald Trump when it's just a handful of people and he's got to make a big decision. Maybe he's in a crisis mode, as you saw, sadly, too much of with the Russian collusion hoax. Could you give us a little insight into how Trump does that? What makes him different than some of the other high level officials you've worked with?
It's a great question. So I was in there the other day, and I'd gone by, and the president said, "Hey, come by the Oval," and he was meeting with some folks. He said, "Sean, come on in." And he's sitting there having a discussion with several staff members, and this was my experience as a staffer too. And from time to time, he'd look up and say, "Sean, what do you think?" And he loves getting different perspectives. The biggest misconception about Donald Trump that I hear from people is, oh, he doesn't listen and he wants to be surrounded by people who tell him the same thing. That could not be farther from the truth. It's in fact the opposite. He invites people, he loves to pit people against each other so that it yields the best possible outcome. So he'll ask people, what do you think of that person's argument? What do you think of that? You make a counter. And the idea is that you hear this iterative process by which you hear the critiques of a plan, the best parts of something else, and hopefully together through that discussion, the best comes out of it. But that's what he encourages. It's just to me, I actually enjoy watching it, not just being a part of it, because you can hear people be challenged. And I've watched the decision making uh, process in other administrations and in other ways. And a lot of times the way it works is it starts at what they call the deputies level. They make a suggestion to the principals level, and those are your cabinet officials and senior White House staff. And then the senior
Yeah.
staff gets together and makes an ultimate recommendation to the president. Says, Mr. President, here's the situation. We believe that you should do the following, right? And the problem with that is that I get why that process is favored by a lot of people. But when you watch Trump make a decision and he invites other people and says, Larry says that we should do X, Y, and Z. Sean says that we should do A, B, and C. Hey, Bob, come in here. Tell me what you think. And Bob says, I get Sean's right on A and B. He's wrong on C. Larry's right on Z. We'll just throw one in for you. Um, and I think, but you start to realize, wow, you just created a cocktail of of a good policy as opposed to just getting an up or down vote.
Yeah.
And so I think I've learned a lot watching it happen.
And do you think that comes from his time, just obviously business, real estate, entertainment, or a little bit of all of the above? Where because each of those are very different disciplines, and to be a successful leader, producer, real estate magnate, those are different disciplines. But he's been able to succeed at the highest levels in all of them.
Yeah, I think it's a consistent thing because when I worked for him during the campaign, that's how he would operate at Trump Tower.
Uh huh.
He'd invite everyone
Okay.
into the office, and then you would sort of same thing. People, the door is always open. That's what's so unique about both how he operated at Trump Tower and then now how he is as well. The door's open. People are just kind of walking in and enjoying the conversation and providing their input. But I think it's a style because it worked for him then, and it's also who he is. So
Yeah.
different people learn different ways. They have different styles. I think this is a pretty consistent style for him. And when you talk to people who've known him a lot longer than I have, they seem to suggest that's something that's been consistent with how he makes deliberations and decisions.
Amazing. All right, now our favorite topic, Sean. You and I talk about them all the time. The media, the press, especially the White
Oh, I
House
thought you were going to talk
reporters. We
about
just
yacht rock.
okay. Second favorite topic.
Second favorite.
We should do a yacht rock special maybe later in the summer when things are like chilling out. You can actually live stream from your boat. It's probably a better signal than we have here from the White House. So that'd be great. The media, the White House reporters. We just had the White House Correspondents Association. What a lamentable display that was this weekend. I mean, they still don't get it. They're completely clueless, yet at the same time sanctimonious.
Yeah, I honestly believe that this is the last iteration of the White House Correspondents' Dinner in its current form that we'll see. So this year was very significant in terms of why it was different. It wasn't just that Donald Trump wasn't there. I mean, I think there were maybe a handful of Republicans that I'd heard reports went, but there was a story in the New York Times where one media outlet reported that these tickets, which I got to be honest with you, having gone to my first dinner in the 90s, used to be the most coveted ticket in Washington, D.C. The people would
Mhm.
fight to get an invite, maybe even a plus one. But this one outlet was quoted in the New York Times saying that they had tried to give seats to their table away to dozens of people who all said no. And I think it's sort of become a shirts and skins kind of thing. You either are on their team or you're on the side of common sense. And so that was different in terms of not just the president not being there, but who else wasn't there. And then secondly, you saw the rise of alternative events. So in the past, it used to be a decision that you would either go or not go. And this year, I've not gone for years because I have a serious issue with what they stand for and how they operate. But this year, there was at least two major alternative events. Steve Bannon and a group of folks close to him put out an alternative event called the Uninvited on Saturday night, and then Substack, which has been a leader in free speech and platforming people who just want to discuss any issue, put on a fantastic event as well. And so you saw this rise of alternative events. So you didn't have to choose anymore. You could say, like, as in my case, by the way, Stephen Miller just walked by as we were
I saw
talking.
him behind you. I was
Yeah.
gonna say something. There he is. There goes Stephen
Uh,
Miller.
yeah.
Uh,
So I think, to me, this is a great day because I've been here at the White House, part of this new media influencer,
yeah.
independent media opportunities that they're offering, and I think it's just fantastic that you don't have to be part of the old legacy guard that is committed to making sure that people read, see, and hear just a one-sided, myopic view of liberal
Yeah.
bias.
Well, and listen, Sean, you've been talking about this. You've been having conversations with me about this for almost 15 years now. You
Yeah,
want to break free. You want to bring in the new media. That was when I was with Breitbart. And he was like, I love
with
what you guys
Breitbart.
are doing at Breitbart. Come on in.
But do you remember
But
how
and
hard it was, Larry, when you were at Breitbart? It was even funny back then, the struggle in the 2012 convention
oh
when we
yeah,
brought people in, and it was like fighting against ourselves, saying, "Well, we'll give them." 10. I think we literally had ultimately 50 alternative members of the media, and it was something that I was committed to doing. We changed it in 2016 even more, and I think we
yep.
finally crossed that hurdle where we're now starting to let more and more people in. But I just don't get why this is such a tough thing. Is that if you are a believer in the First Amendment, then you should want more voices, not less.
Well,
The last thing I'll say on the dinner is this: for all these people that love to drape themselves in the First Amendment and the freedom of the press, not one of them said a single thing when Joe Biden in his White House stripped 440 independent journalists of their hard passes. Not one. And then they want
that's
to get
right.
up there and sanctimoniously tell all of us about their commitment to the First Amendment. It's ridiculous.
You were a visionary with regard to new media, and that's why I wanted to ask. And forgive me, these are the things I've never been able to ask you, over a beer. Uh, what Caroline Levitt's been able to do in the first
Mhm.
100 days in terms of isolating the White House correspondents, redoing the press pool, redoing who gets to sit in what seat, or moving in that direction, and sort of taking the fangs out. I got to think you wanted to do that. Did you? You did a little bit of it. You did quite a bit of
Yeah.
it, actually. But did you not go all the way because you were still trying to make nice, or was there something holding you back? What's the difference?
That's a great question. There's two parts to it. One, we weren't there yet, right? We didn't have, like, as I'm walking through the White House today, I'm here with a bunch of influencers, Rogan O'Hanley, Emily Austin, and Aaron Wexler, Chad Prather. You were here last week with Chris DeGaulle, though.
Last
I
week,
mean,
uh,
with
well, Matt
but
Walsh was there, Ben
right,
Ferguson, Tim
but I
Pool.
mean,
It's a whole new
right.
field.
But
Yeah.
just think about this. Tim Pool, I don't even think existed when I was White House press
He
secretary. I
was
think he was probably
gaming. Yeah, he was a
he was probably
gamer.
14 years old. So I think the evolution in what's available is vastly different. So that's number one. But number two, and this goes to the heart of what you're asking, Larry, is that in fact, Caroline and I had some of these conversations during the transition. I said to her, just be careful when you make these decisions about what you're doing, make sure the team is behind you. And what I meant by that was I had a lot of people who had suggestions about the changes that we should have made when we were coming in 2016 or 2017 rather. And I would turn around every once in a while and say, like, it's like, hey, let's charge the hill. Let's go do this. And I turn around and, sure enough, there'd be no one behind me. And I thought to
Yes.
myself, okay, if this doesn't go well, the president's not going to be too excited about it. And so to me, um, you know, uh, I think that's really the difference. And I said to Caroline, when you go make these changes, just make sure that everybody agrees with you on what you're about to do, so that when there's consternation in the media, which there will be, that everybody says, "Great, this is what we talked about." It's kind of like how they're handling tariffs. The president said there's going to be disruption, and you knew there was going to be disruption. And I think I didn't, to be blunt, feel like enough people had my back. So we did bring in Skype. We did do a lot of that kind of stuff, and I think
I
we
remember.
really broke the mold. And a
Mhm.
lot of it, the Biden administration and both Jen Psaki and Karine Jean-Pierre undid. But we really, I think, started the ball rolling on this idea of bringing in new media, and Caroline's taken it to an amazing new height.
Yeah. So looking forward, we did done a lot of talk about what happened over the last 100 days and in the first term. What do you see on the horizon? What are you seeing on the horizon that no one else is talking about right now in terms of what this president is going to try to accomplish, or what might be looming there that it could be a pitfall?
So I think, to me, the couple things that I really want to see is how does all of the Doge stuff manifest itself? Does Congress actually codify some of these cuts in a rescissions package or through the next budget or whatever? So I think some of these things, and this goes back to what you and I were talking about just, at the beginning here, which is how much of this stuff becomes permanent, becomes codified in law or in the budget or what have you. So that's kind of, what I'm really focused on, is uh, how much of this happens. And then I also think, like, look, I think the president's done a great job on the culture issue, um, on whether it's DEI and rooting out wokeness. But to answer your question, one of the things that I would like to see done is, for example, like we need to think ahead. So, for example, I think that given the chance, Democrats would make DC a state. What that would mean is two additional permanent Democratic senators. And so I would like to see the president lead an effort where, say, he sent most of DC back to Maryland. Remember, DC used to be a perfect square, right? And that's what
Yeah.
the Constitution called out. And where I live in Virginia used to technically be part of DC, but it was given back. What I would like to see is the rest of Maryland carve out a federal district in accordance with what the framers had in the Constitution, and then give the rest back to Maryland, to avoid that from happening and to take the talking point away from Democrats. I also think the same kind of stuff on, like, voter integrity or election integrity, where there's things that we need to codify in law so that the Democrats can't undo a lot of this stuff, and pursue these reckless policies that they did under Joe Biden. They showed us their cards under Joe Biden, and so now we need to make sure that we lock as much of this stuff in as possible before. I believe that the House will stay Republican. I think that they've earned it, but you just never know. And so my point is, I think that these guys need to lock in as much as possible as soon as possible.
All right. I guess we'll leave it there. Although, well, one final question here. You mentioned yacht rock, and I mean, do you have a favorite, or is it hard to nail down that whole genre? I mean, is there one go-to for you?
Yeah. So I don't think that this, frankly, is controversial. Um, I
Really?
think the people who are yacht rock aficionados, who are true students of yacht rock, know what
Yeah.
I'm talking about. Admiral Christopher Cross,
Yeah.
I think,
For
is
Cross.
clearly the leader in this. You don't have yacht rock without sailing. It is the go-to anthem of yacht rock. You cannot have anything more yacht rock. That being said, the Commodore to the Admiral is clearly Michael McDonald.
Michael
Michael
McDonald. Sure,
McDonald,
sure. Yeah.
yes, he is the through line in yacht rock. Think about not only his work solo, but with the Doobie Brothers, with
The
people like
Dubes.
Christopher Cross, and he is so instrumental in that genre that, again, I can see why some in the academic community believe that there is a spirited debate among some of the top folks, but not me. Christopher Cross is the Admiral.
For Cross.
Uh, Michael McDonald is clearly the Commodore.
Sailing, Steal Away, Arthur's theme. Anything else? Because I'm
No,
I'm sort
well,
of
first of
lost
all,
on the Christopher Cross.
Ride Like the Wind, definitely number two.
Oh,
Well,
Ride
above
Like the Wind.
Harshness
Okay,
Gate.
I'll give you Ride Like the
Yeah,
Wind. Ride Like the Wind.
yeah,
You're right. You're right. I'll give you that one.
yeah.
But
That's what I'm saying. That those two songs, while Michael McDonald may have more hits in the genre
Yeah.
that I don't think that there is a genre without Mr. Christopher Cross.
Hall and Oates though crossed over into like mainstream big
Again,
time pop
again, I
there in
that
the
just
mid
you
'80s.
can right, and again, I do think that you can have a hit. A person just because they have one yacht rock song doesn't mean they are a yacht rocker, right? You
I
can
see.
dock up, but you don't doesn't necessarily mean that you get membership in the yacht
Dock Up?
club.
Is that I
Yes.
didn't realize that. Thank you. See, again,
Yeah.
I'm always smarter at the end of the conversation when I talk to you, Sean Spicer. Stephen Bishop, does he fit in there at all?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. I think Steven, but again, you don't. I don't look at an artist and say they're exclusively one genre or another. Stephen Bishop's
Just
definitely got a couple hits, but he's there. There's no question about it. But I think what we've seen too many people try to jam into that genre, which just to squeeze in Spyro Gyro. I see some of these things popping up, and I get why people want to get on the bandwagon now. But I'm very clear. I call balls and strikes all the time on this.
That's true. That's one thing that we've always known about you. Sean, thanks so much for lending your expertise to so many things in our lives. We're more enriched because we know you.
Very true. Very true. All right. Well, if you do find anything negative on the internet about me, please let me know and we will scrub it.
There
I try
there
to tell
might be
people
a
all the time,
meme or
just
two. I didn't know if you knew about this, but there were a few memes that were
a meme,
created.
a meme.
Uh, yes, a meme, exactly.
Okay,
I'll
I'll
uh,
look for
I'll
that.
I'll explain it to you over drinks.
Yeah, text
Thank
me
you,
or
Sean.
put it on Friendster.
Sure. You know what? I'm gonna post it. Never mind. Thank you, Sean.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. I'm just gonna leave it there because this is just a death spiral. That's Sean Spicer, boys and girls, and he's a good one. Thanks for watching today. We'll be back next time. In the meantime, my name's Larry O'Connor, and you can call me there.